Hey, hello everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce for this presentation Professor Jürgen Flög. I'm Anna Teti, professor at University of L'Aquila and chair of the TMS. Professor Flög is the head of the Division of Nephrology in Clinical Immunology at University of Aachen, Aquisgrana in Italian. He received his clinical training in nephrology at the Hanover Medical School, the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, and the University of Washington in Seattle in the United States. He is former vice dean of the University of Aachen, executive council member of the International Society of Nephrology and the European Renal Association, and is current member of the executive board of the Kidney Disease Global Science nonprofit organization. He is distinguished fellow in of the European Renal Association and past president of the German Society of Nephrology and the honorary member of many international nephrology societies. He co-edits the best-selling textbook Comprehensive Clinical Nephrology. Professor Flög is co-editor of the Journal of Nephrology, Dialysis and Transplantation, member of the editorial board of the Journal of the American Society of Nephrology, Kidney International, Nature Reviews Nephrology, and Journal of Nephrology. Research interests encompass both basic research and clinical science, in particular on renal fibrosis, immune-mediated renal disease, in particular the IgA nephropathy, and we share this interest, bone and mineral disorders and cardiovascular disease in uremic patients. He authored about 700 original papers, reviews and editorials, and 40 book chapters. Professor Flög, as you see, is an eminent scientist, and he has been so nice to accept our invitation to talk about how to ruin your presentation, which is a big problem of scientists of any age, any discipline. So thank you, Jürgen, for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
My pleasure. It's always great talking to young people and telling them what you can do wrong, and I tell you there's a lot you can do wrong. So let me just share my screen. This is my funny hospital. It's actually, for those of you who don't know where Aquisgrana is located, it's where Charlemagne lived and where, in a way, Europe was founded. And Germany was founded. So it's the most important city in German history, except nobody knows about this. My office is right there, and these trees in the back are already Netherlands, and over here would be Belgium. So I probably have the only office from where I can see 3 countries. Now, how to ruin your presentation? Let's ask the expert. These are quotes from Eric Dixon. Eric Dixon is a professional BBC speaker, and he has come up with the 3 S rules. Your lecture should have substance. And a good thing is reverse engineering. So you start in a way at the end and you ask yourself, what is my take-home message? And then you develop the evidence. The cloud of could. Yeah, you could say many things, but you first make the key statement. So good examples are stories, anecdotes, and we'll come to this because that's what people memorize. Structure, 15%, what will I talk about? 70%, 75% tell them, and 10% for the conclusion. So the approach is called intro. Make them jump and surprise. And I will give you some examples of this. This is how you capture the audience. Need to know. Trust, do I have credibility as a speaker? And role, why I'm here today. Outline, what will I talk about? And the 3rd S is style. Language letter. Don't use complex English. I hate it when they read these slides to me. Spoken language is different. But also don't make the mistake of speaking something totally different from what is on your slides. That will also confuse your audience. And then some basic rules. Fractions are more convincing than percentages. Doesn't apply today, but make eye contact with all of your audience. It's amazing how you can keep them awake. And ABC bridging, connect their question and your answer. Acknowledge you understood what they said, bridge, and communicate. So this is fairly abstract, but let's go into detail. Now comes my part, how to ruin your presentation. First, a disclaimer, I'm not in the possession of final wisdom. I make mistakes. My first talk was 38 years ago, and I was nervous like hell. It was to zoologists, so I was really nervous. So what you hear today is a lot of experiences, good and bad ones. So this is my outline, slide layout. Seems simple, but it's forgotten every day. First point, size matters. If they can't read it, don't show it. Make use of the space you have. I often see slides where 10% of the slide is used. A great inspiration for us is Wednesday Journal Club. Every Wednesday morning, together with a gastroenterologist, we have a journal club. Usually it's some eminent paper. And because junior doctors are overworked, they never take their time in preparing, and they show great thing. It's a great source of inspiration. They will show this, for example. And, you know, when the speaker starts with, I know you can't read this, but you know it's a bad slide. If they know you can't read it, why don't they make a nice slide of this? And why don't they simply show whatever they want to show? Nobody can read this. If they can't read it, don't show it. Size matters and less is more. Same slide, but again, very difficult to read. Now you have a first idea that you can read this, but how about pointing out this? So if you want to stress something, underline it, or even if you really have the time, make it big. And that's how you get your audience on board rather than losing your audience. And note that half the table is deleted. Less is more, and there's no use of showing the whole table if you are not going to comment on this. Always also remember to add the correct reference. There are copyright issues. It doesn't apply to many science meetings, but I've spoken in many meetings where they do movies of this. And you can be pursued because you infringe the copyright. So always make certain you have the correct full reference in the corner. Don't call it Cooper New England Journal. Give the correct reference. Research meetings are also a source of inspiration, and I love them as well. In research meetings, a common mistake is showing all your data in one slide. The really hardcore researchers like this. Hey, look, I have so many slides, so many data that I need to show everything on one slide. Nobody can read this. And it's really a tragedy because nobody will read this. Why not show it big time? And you can see that this part of the slide is now visible to everyone. And you can now really point out things like the thing that this mouse man is a very unhappy mouse man because look at this. This is his testis. It's a rock. So it's a very unhappy man. Contrast matters. I had the blessing of having had two colorblind bosses, including, believe it or not, a pathologist completely colorblind. So some contrasts are terrible. Other contrasts are good or very good. This is okay, but the best is still a hard contrast. And better, just if you compare this and that, make it a little transparent and improve the contrast. So this is one of the illustrations. For somebody who has color blindness, and I tell you, this is not rare in the population. For somebody who is color blind, he or she would be unable to distinguish these columns. They would all look gray and would almost have the same gray shade. It's much better using blue, red, and orange. And actually, if you look, for example, in the New England Journal, they always have blue and red because of color blindness. So that's a very simple issue to keep in mind. Issue number 4, invest some work in important images. 5, redo tables or better avoid them. You probably know the saying that a picture shows more than 1,000 words. Tables are like words. It's very hard to appreciate tables unless they are very easy. If I can, would avoid tables. So here's something. These are copies comparing 2 glomerular filtration rates, and this is taken directly from the publication. Then I've tried to work on this, and it got really bad. And you can do a lot on them. Also, what I don't like, because I think it's not polite to your audience. Look at this. There's parts of the y-axis missing, calculated what, and what is your unit. Everything is missing here. Slides have to be self-explanatory. And you should really work on slides. For example, take this, add good lettering and add explanations, make it clear, and possibly even help your audience a little more by adding these lines. And then you can nicely show that up here, the correlation is miserable, but once you go down and go below 30, it's really tight. And this slide all of a sudden has become easy to read. But I agree, it takes a little work. And this would be the ultimate touch, helping your audience. And then finally, of course, somebody may wake up right now. Explain to them what is shown here and make your slide self-explanatory. This is a table. It's terrible. Just imagine you have to look at this. Somebody is speaking, and at the same time, you're supposed to integrate in a way all of these numbers. It is essentially impossible. Also, what I don't like about this table is that the table lettering is larger than the headline. That doesn't make sense at all. And it's almost impossible to focus in this slide. Tables are much more difficult to appreciate quickly, in particular if there are as many numbers as this one. We come back to this example. It's a table, and apart from the many numbers, impossible to read. So if you really want to point out things, invest a little time. Make the table yourself and avoid these many numbers. Just show the key numbers you want to talk about. And see how I used blue and red instead of blue and green, red and green. Issue number 6, less is more. Avoid unnecessary detail. Avoid long texts. You will read it anyway, and they can read. And as I already said, somebody may wake up right now. Don't use abbreviations unless they are really standard. Make your slides self-explanatory. This is taken directly from a publication. If you wake up right now First of all, you have no idea what this headline indicates. And in looking at this in theory, these are beautiful images, but they are totally ruined by all these arrows and letters and boxes and things. So you have to ask your colleague, could you please provide the original images to me? And then you come up with a slide, which is beautiful. And you only show those slides where you want to talk about. For example, you tell your audience, I want to comment on this box, and here you have it in large magnification. Same here. I want to talk about this box, and here you have the box in large magnification. And then you can go through this and explain it as you speak. And you have explained to the person who wakes up in your title, I agree, it's a few too many words, but at least somebody can note what is shown here. A great slide, you would agree. Lots of texts. There is absolutely no need for long sentences. If you read this, you can be dead certain you lose your audience. Take away this. So make this a short list. Traditional explanation, same as here, traditional explanation. Generalized atherosclerosis is often associated with nephrosclerosis. New data show, and you go over these. And if you really want to lose low contrast images, add shadow. For example, if I go back and forth, it becomes clearer now. It's just one click, but it helps your readership to have less problems reading this. Because eventually you might end up in a room where the light is not optimal and it may actually be bright, and then you want as much contrast at all as possible. Of course, normally I would try to make these boxes darker. This is a common danger. PowerPoint offers so many layouts. Don't lose your message in layout orgies. For example, look at this. First of all, you can't read this. Second of all, this is impossible to read. Third, everybody is looking at the background. Nobody is looking at what you want to say. And this is not relevant. It doesn't matter that I'm from Aachen. You want to talk about this. So think about this. Same slide. So here's your slide, same slide here. Make use of the space you have. Give them an explanation. And don't forget the reference. And then as you talk, this is a really nice thing. As you talk, you illustrate. So your risk increases by 1.5-fold if your GFR falls. If it falls further, 2.8-fold, 4.6-fold if it really increases. And 65-fold in dialysis. And this is nice because your audience can really connect to this. This is what I call a surgical slides. I have friends with surgeons, but they're different people. Don't quote me on this. But my experience is that surgeons sometimes have very colorful slides. And of course, who cares about the damn firework here when you want to talk about this? Same here. Who cares about these stupid images and what do they have to do with what I want to talk about? Yes, sometimes an image can be nice because it can make slides look nicer, but then at least have something that relates to your slide. So here's the same thing, and now you can start pointing out the ultimate slide. This is a real slide and it's taken from an anesthesiologist lecture. Surgery, sugars, lipids, oxidative stress, reactive glycogen. carbonyl stress, and here's my favorite. You can hardly read this. And you have all the colors of the rainbow, including some neon colors, which I particularly like, on this one slide. And don't get lost in color orgies. I know I'm stepping on toes here, and I know that some people will not like me, but I think this is an awful slide. I love slides by anesthesiologists. So those were the first 8 points. Size matters, make use of the space, contrast matters, invest work, redo tables or better avoid them, delete things, and really ask yourself, what do I want to show and what do I want to talk? Less is more. Do not lose your message in layout orgies, and somebody may wake up right now. Make slides self-explanatory. Don't use abbreviations. Actually, many journals these days discourage the use of abbreviations other than the most common ones. The structure of a talk. Don't leave the audience disoriented. So it's usually nice to provide some info on the structure or to develop a schematic. And you should very frequently summarize. The rule of thumb is 1 slide, 1 minute. And don't overload your lecture with detail. So, for example, what I find is a very nice way of structuring your talk is here you have a complex scheme. Lots of arrows, question marks, lots of boxes, very complex. But what can be really nice, if this is the structure of your lecture and you start easy, and then you talk about this part, and then you present evidence for this part, and then you talk about new evidence and add this arrow and that arrow and that arrow and that arrow and that arrow. And this is your summary then. So at the end of a half-hour lecture, you will have explained this complex scheme in detail, but at the same time, this is your structure. And the audience can always look, oh, this is where we are. Don't become boring. Avoid uniform layout with little variation. Add a good joke, and I'm stressing good here. Or tell a story. People love stories. Sometimes I tell small anecdotes. Of course, you need some experience and you have to witness all these anecdotes. But I can tell you from my students and from lectures that people love having anecdotes, in particular if you can giggle. Giggling is a great way of waking people up. Involve your audience, ask them a question. It doesn't work with all of your audience, but sometimes you can address them directly. So here's a great thing. I was once at the XYZ investigator meeting, and the Spanish colleague started with this. And it's a great story of how too many slides with a similar structure will very quickly bore you. So he started like this, and went on like that, and went on like that, and went on, and on, and on, and on. 35 slides with a similar structure. Nobody was able to stay alive, or awake at least. So please give the audience some break. And a break could be an anecdote, could be something that is different, but don't use 35 slides with the same layout. I know that PowerPoint offers layout slides. I hate it. I do hate the PowerPoint auto layout feature. Attention span is about 10 minutes, and then the audience starts to fall asleep, and you can't avoid it. Somebody will always fall asleep. But don't worry. No matter what you do, some people will always sleep, and a great way would be to offer beds in the audience. But I guess it's a little dangerous and difficult. Here's a great paper. It's from Canada. Incidence of and risk factors for nodding off at scientific sessions. It is for the nodding at presentations NAP investigators. And they identified risk factors for nodding off. And the highest risk factor was a monotonous tone. Some people will speak without any modulation, and they will simply continue to speak, and it is impossible to stay awake because they always speak at the same level. And the other one is a tweed jacket. I have no idea why this is so, but never ever wear a tweed jacket when you give a presentation. And they came up with this wonderful curve, the number of nodding off events at lectures versus the duration of the lecture. And in fact, when you tilt it, you see what is happening here. It is difficult to keep people awake. I'm saying patients now, to keep people awake when you give a lecture. Don't become boring. Add a good joke here and there, or tell a story. Involve your audience. So this is one illustration from a lecture that I've once given. Maldifferentiation of mesenchymal stem cells in progressive anti-Thy1-GN. It's a very funny observation where one picture makes a whole story, and it is this picture. What my colleague Uta Kunta had done is she had injected mesenchymal stem cells in this particular glomerular disease, and of course, we had assumed, oh, we give stem cells, everything will get better. And then we found these funny things in the middle of a glomerulus. And we had no idea what had happened. And then somebody said, oh, this looks like fat. And we did a lipid stain in another fixative, and indeed, this is fat. So these stem cells had done what most of us will do. They become fat. And this is a great way of maldifferentiation. So you can use an image like this to make your point. But you see how there's essentially nothing on this slide. It is just to catch your audience and surprise them. Surprising your audience helps getting them involved. Another thing is, this sounds dry. Why FSGS trials fail? FSGS is not one disease, but then you can illustrate this. And again, come with something unexpected. FSGS is kidney scarring, and I only want to make the point that just because two scars look alike, it does not make them one disease. Scars can have different origins. And you explain it by showing this. Just because they look alike, they're not the same. And whereas this one needs good antipsychotic therapy, I have no idea what this one needs. But don't overdo it. I have a colleague who has a joke in every second slide. In addition, these jokes are often difficult to read, in particular if English is not your native language. Remember, and this is an experience I made repeatedly. You may know the magazine The New Yorker, and my ultimate test whether I'm good speaking English was if I could understand the jokes in The New Yorker. Jokes often have cultural backgrounds, or they have figures that only this country is familiar with. And you have to read small print. So I'm not really a friend of jokes like this. still the best, get their attention with a sex and crime story. So come with something unexpected. Here's an example. When I give my lecture to the students on acute kidney failure, they come and they sit and they, acute kidney failure. And I start with this, the Indian vulture. The Indian vulture, also known as Gibbs indicus, has a problem. They're all dead. In fact, 99% of the Indian vultures died. And when you open these vultures, their organs have this funny gray coating. It's actually, this is no joke, this is a Nature paper. And they excluded all typical causes for acute kidney injury. And they found that these vultures have what is called visceral gout. So uric acid crystals everywhere. And that's a common problem in birds. So this is from a small parrot. And you can see that this bird has gout crystals here located. Now, what does the Indian vulture do? The Indian vulture eats the Indian cow, because in India, the cow is holy. And the cow dies on the street. And then come the vultures, and away goes the cow. Now, the problem is that the Indian farmer loves his cow. And the big problem is that the Indian farmer gives them things like this, because they feel sorry for the cow and they give them diclofenac, a painkiller. Now, from this story, I have learned that diclofenac cannot be degraded in nature. So one day there will be diclofenac everywhere, and you have simply have to go to the Mediterranean Sea and take a sip of water, and you have your painkiller. Now, the other problem is that the Indian vulture is always at the edge of dehydration. There's not a lot of water in India. It's very hot. If you are dehydrated and you take diclofenac, you will develop kidney failure very abruptly. And there's now a huge initiative in India where the veterinary doctors say, please give, if you want to give a painkiller to your cow, don't give them diclofenac, give them meloxicam. Why am I telling this to you? Because now every student wants to know what is it about acute kidney failure and how does diclofenac do it and am I at risk? And what can I do to save the Indian vulture? So here's an example of telling a story and make it really interesting. Another very short story is this. You all know this, you're Italian, so you know Sandro Botticelli, The Birth of Venus. But please look at Venus. Don't look at the breasts. Look at the Venus's foot and the hands. Now clearly, Sandro Botticelli was a great painter and he could paint people. So he didn't paint this by chance because he was a bad painter. There's something wrong here and the foot looks swollen and distorted. And the explanation is probably that around 1500, no woman of decent origin would ever undress in front of a painter. So what could the painter do to have a model? Because he couldn't go to the internet and have a look at a naked woman. They had to have a model. What did they do? They probably took prostitutes. What did prostitutes in those days have? They had sexually transmitted diseases. And this is probably an early painting of gonorrhea. Gonorrhea arthritis in a medieval prostitute. And this is a great way of opening your lecture on arthritis. So art can be amazing, what you find in there to illustrate your lecture. So what did I say? Just to repeat a third time, size matters. If they can't read it, don't show it. Make use of the space you have. Don't leave half of your slide blank. Contrast matters. Color blindness is common. Invest work in important images. Don't simply make a screenshot, work on it. Redo tables, or better even avoid them at all. Or if you really want, just put very little on there. Less is more, delete unnecessary detail. Remember this terrible slide taken from a publication. Make slides self-explanatory, so there's absolutely no reason why you should leave A, B, C, D, whatever lettering in there. Don't lose your message in layout orgies. Remember the anesthesiology slide. Don't leave your audience disoriented. Give them some structure. Where am I in the lecture? Don't become boring. I know this is the toughest part, but keep your audience awake. And just as a reminder, and I'll be happy to send them to you as a PDF. This is what the expert says. Remember the 3 S's. And I hope that now you have understood a little more of this and what this relatively abstract slide will mean to you and how you will eventually give a better lecture. So thank you all for listening to me, and I hope you have learned a little of this.
Thank you, Jürgen. It was great. I enjoyed it very much, although I have heard another presentation years ago on this same topic, and it was really very enjoyable. Thank you. So we have already some questions. I will start with the first one from Vincenzo Rizzi. He asked, is the slide numbering important?
It can be, but not really. I mean, so what does it mean to me that this is slide number 16? And it can actually be frustrating and scary if some people put slide 16 out of 78 and you get scared. I have never seen a good reason to number your slides.
Okay, good, thank you. We have now Francesco Salamida. Some people strongly suggest to start a talk with the statement of the take-home message. I generally avoid, as it seems to me, to reveal the murderer at the beginning of the story. According to your experience, what is your opinion on this point?
Both is true. It depends what you want to do. Sometimes it can be wonderful to develop your message and then at the very end tell them, this is what I think, and this is what you should take home. But it can, in other instances, it can be really great if the audience knows upfront, hey, this is my main message, and I will now convince you why this is my main message. And I give you all the evidence, so you're repeating yourself. Both is true, and I have no one is best or one for all recommendation. You should adapt this to your topic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the next one is from Marco Ponsetti. Do you have any additional specific advice for online lectures?
No, I hate online lectures because I can't see you and I can't see whether you giggle or you sleep. If you were sleeping or if you were about to sleep, I would look at you and talk into your direction. I know this is not fair, but I guess you would be awake after that. So normally I do keep people awake when I lecture to them.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Michela Ciocca. Do you think it is permissible to modify images that were not made by the presenter, for example, for a journal club?
You are allowed to use images from scientific publications as long as you quote the source. Depending on who you talk to, you can pick images from the web, but always make certain that you give the link at the bottom. Never pretend these are your images. You will also find some websites with free images, and I've bookmarked these, which are very good. There, if you go to the internet, you will discover some websites where they deliberately say, please use these images. But usually for a scientific, I mean, you will find cats and dogs and babies and who knows, yeah. But these images are rarely good for scientific talks. But if you use screenshots, give the source. If this is put on YouTube later on, delete those slides. You usually don't have the copyright.
Ilaria Di Carlo asks, could inserting videos into the presentation help make the presentation less boring for the audience?
Well, usually what videos in presentations work is they disrupt them because they don't work.
I agree.
I never do it.
You may remember in the past when there was no the internet and the computer that people had two sets of slides.
This was the ultimate nightmare. I mean, exactly. The children here don't know this, but you had two different slide projectors. And then the projector got confused, and it was, advance the left one. No, the right one back. And it was so disruptive.
In fact, I never used it. Loredana Parisi asks, how can you best prepare yourself for the questions of listeners? Let me add that I appreciate the way you are discussing, Jürgen, because you give short answers, not repeating the lecture.
Right. So yes, give short answers, but sometimes, they will catch you off guard. Like once I was caught by an anatomist asking me, is it the glomerulus or the glomerulum? And very honestly say, I have no idea. Interesting question. I will look it up. Or even worse, tell them, please look it up and tell me afterwards. Make them work for you.
Argia Ucci asks, how much is important to build a presentation, taking into consideration the type of audience?
Absolutely. I mean, you've immediately lost your audience when, even staying in medicine, when I talk to general practitioners, they hate figures from scientific publication. They hate hazard ratios. They hate curves. They want easy messages, easy to digest. A colleague of mine once made a really bad statement. I will tell it to you anyway. She said the audience can take home one message per talk. In a way, that's true. If all of you who listen in now ask yourself, what did Flöge say? The good ones of you will come up with 5 take-home points. The bad ones will come up with the message, he talked about how to ruin your presentation, but I have no idea what he said. It's amazing and scary how quickly you forget.
Yeah, and the same is also for the papers. So the take-home message are not that many, although the papers now are really big with high number of figures. I would like to touch on the abbreviation actually, because this is a serious problem also for young people who write papers, not only the slides. So they really use a high number of abbreviation with no meaning at all. I find this really disturbing, both in the papers and in the slides. So what do you think?
I 100% agree. I'm an associate editor of Kidney International, which is one of the 2 leading journals in nephrology. And I've seen abstracts where I simply said, I will not even consider taking this paper into the review process before the authors haven't made the abstract legible. Too many abbreviations can totally ruin everything. Yeah. And I will get confused. And this is official message by Kidney International. Don't use non-standard abbreviations.
I fully agree. In fact, I spend a lot of my time just rewriting the abbreviation that my students include in their papers. Yes. We have Marco again. How do you feel about the mid-presentation summaries? Also, how important is rehearsing your presentation in your opinion?
It depends. First of all, summaries are wonderful. And summaries in the middle of your lecture are wonderful. Or you build your presentation and you add one take-home message after another. Everything's possible, and not every lecture should be the same structure. Again, this is, if you're speaking a lot, this is how the audience likes you, because they never know what you will do. And the second part was, do I rehearse? No longer. I simply just lecture, but I can tell you, I started the hard way. One of my old bosses was a person called Stanley Sheldon. Every nephrologist knows Stanley Sheldon because he's one of the inventors of dialysis. And he was a classic manic depressive and could be really rude, but he was a great teacher for rehearsals. Yes, it does make sense to present your lecture in your small group before you give it in a large congress, in particular if you're young and you're nervous.
Yeah.
But yeah. I tell you, it disappears after a while.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for young people, it's important because you can ask questions and so they manage to answer. Another problem that I see is that sometimes in the slides, the young people write terms they do not know. And in fact, if you ask a question on that specific term, they have no answer. So this is something that they should understand. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Alfredo Capariello asked, but I think that you answered already, any rules or suggestions for properly handling a discussion after a presentation?
No, give short answers and be concise. And answer, I mean, the rule of thumb is like in court. When you have to testify in court, the rule is you answer what you're asked and you don't ever do blah blah, because then you will get yourself in danger.
I agree, and this is true also for those who ask questions. Sometimes they're also complex. Valeria Palumbo asked, do you have any programs you'd prefer to draw clear graphs?
I simply use PowerPoint. I know there are much better ones now. And I'm amazed what some of my fellows do. For example, some use Adobe Illustrator, and they create wonderful images. I'm always jealous of them.
Chiara Puri asks, do you think it is important to prepare additional slides to answer the questions during the discussion?
Could be. If you're limited to 8 minutes or 7 minutes and you have to present complex data, it makes sense to have backup slides. But remember, usually then you don't have too much time for discussion as well. So if you have to go to your backup slides and have to dig through 10 slides to find the one you want to talk about, it's no use.
Yeah, I agree. In my opinion, I immediately realize when people has no data to show, because they have very long introductions, and after 20 minutes of introduction, they show two graphs.
Yeah.
So I think that this is also a mistake. I don't know what you think about. But,
well, the same rule applies, and I'm tough on that one, when you write an abstract for your paper. A good abstract has 10% introduction, 30% message, 50% data, 10% conclusion. And the same should be true for a scientific talk. People don't want to hear the introduction, they want to hear your data.
Yeah.
Having said that, make certain that the introduction is good enough so they can understand your data.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And another point is that when you have written slides, and many use written slides, especially if English is not your mother language, I think that it's important that you read what it is in the slide, and it's not that you talk about something else, because the audience get confused. They try to read and listen your voice, so they don't know.
It's a deadly sin. It's a deadly sin to have long sentences on the slide and then say something different. Oh, I think there's something wrong. You're back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
the connection
it's a deadly sin to have sentences on your slide and then say something different. Only the women can listen to you, because women think with two brain halves. Men only have one half of the brain that they use. So make it easy for the men. And
this is not a joke. I mean, it's true.
No, it's true.
So it seems that the Broca area works on both hemisphere in women. So I think this is just physiology. Okay. Is there any other question? Someone that wants to, no question from the screen. Oh, Gabriele and Andrea, do you think one slide every 3-4 minutes for university student lectures are very few?
Yes. You know, it can be, unless you tell a funny story. I think I like to have one slide per minute. It could be more if you build up very quickly, let's say a scheme, then you can have more. But one slide every 3 to 4 minutes, that's a lot of talking.
Yeah, in fact, the rules when we were young was one slide per minute. And so if you had a 20 minutes talk, 20 slides.
Yes, one diapositive per minute.
Exactly. Exactly. But that was another time when making slides was really difficult. So if you
you always need a chocolate, because you had to bribe the photography center to make your slides first.
Exactly. Okay. Any other question, comments? Marco, you have something to say? You can also raise your hands and open your microphone in case.
Okay, no, there are no questions from the live stream. So
we know that Jürgen has to go, and he has another meeting at 3 o'clock. So Jürgen, it's been really great to meet you again, although just virtually. Right. And I hope that also the nephrology meetings start again, so I can attend some of them just with my husband, as you know.
It's true. People miss contact.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you very much. And maybe we can invite you next time for discussing about nephrology.
Yes. Okay. My pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, maybe we can introduce the
Yes.
next event.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so the next event is actually this Thursday, so we're not going to wait until next week. In the usual time, usual place, and we have a journal club called CRISPR-Off Enables Spatio-Temporal Control of CRISPR Editing. You all know CRISPR, the CRISPR technology, got the Nobel Prize this year, so I'm sure you're all curious about hearing about this CRISPR-Off new technology, and it will be delivered by the TMS Journal Club working group. So don't miss it, and we will see each other on Thursday.
Yeah, Marco, let me add to the audience that if you have any idea, any guest that you want to invite, so we are an open group and everybody can contribute. So just don't be shy. You can contact Marco and he will help you to organize the event. Okay, thank you. Marco, you can close.
Anyway, yeah, also the last thing, we are still looking for people to manage the YouTube channel. So if you want to be involved, you want to get involved, just let us know. You can contact me and we will fix you up. Okay, thank you very much and bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.